Everyone in the yard moved at the same time, everyone except one. It was like the wind itself gave the order. Men stood from the benches, some sat, some faced the wall. Nobody spoke. No whistle blew. No guard shouted. But the whole yard shifted as one, like a flock of birds turning in the sky. Leo didn't move fast enough. He was new. He blinked at the hard sun and stayed half standing, half sitting. In that slice of a second, heads turned without turning, eyes glanced without moving, and a quiet rule rose up out of the concrete: obey or disappear. A folded paper the size of a matchbox slid across the ground, stopping at Leo's shoe. A tiny cough clicked from a bench, a sound most folks would miss. The paper wasn't for him. He knew it now. His toes lifted. Too slow. The yard door boomed. Red lights began to blink. Officers stepped forward, hands open, radios ready. No one said Leo's name, but he felt it anyway, like a cold hand on the back of his neck. Count, a voice called. Men turned to the wall and showed their hands. The paper vanished like a fish in shallow water. Leo breathed. Once. Twice. The line held. The red light burned. He kept his eyes on the crack in the concrete and thought, if I broke a rule I can't see, how do I fix it? Just then the loudspeaker clicked. Escort team to C yard. A shadow moved. A name nobody said floated through the silence. And before Leo could decide whether to stand or kneel or vanish, the officers pointed, not at him, but at the man who had been teaching him how to stay alive. Dante. Cuff up. The yard did not gasp. It did not cry out. It did what Pelican Bay's Underworld always does when a choice has been made. It went very, very still. That morning had started like almost every other. Fog from the Pacific hugging the razor wire, gulls circling the towers, doors humming open. In the clinic, Nurse Tanya lined little cups of medicine and taped a note to her cart. Check sleep. Ask about headaches. She liked to use names. Names kept people human in a place that tried to erase them. Officer Rivera, coffee in hand, scanned the watchboard. Short staff, 2 cameras, fuzzy, yard call bumped. He had worked here long enough to feel weather inside buildings. Today felt like thunder before thunder. In his cell, Leo tucked his sheet tight, a habit that gave him something to control. Dante watched with a tired smile. He had the kind of calm that looked simple and wasn't. Listen more than you look, Dante said, tying his laces. Here, silence is loud. It tells you where to stand before your feet know it. What if I don't understand? Leo asked. Then stand behind me, Dante said. Obey the room until you learn why. In the chow hall, trays slid, steam rose, screens barked news with no sound. An older man flicked his eyes at a clock that didn't work. Another slid a plastic spoon 1 inch left. These were not accidents. They were tiny buoys on a secret map. Rivera stood by the door and drank the room in. When things ran quiet, he felt safest and most afraid at once. Quiet was either peace or a plan. Back in the unit, the day spun out in slow, small pieces. A trustee mopped a square twice. A counselor walked by with forms. From a vent came 3 soft taps, a pause, then 5, a pattern Leo had started to notice. It drifted across the tier like a heartbeat you hear with your feet. What does that mean? Leo asked. Dante kept his face still. Could mean hold. Could mean shift. Could mean eyes up. How can one sound mean so many things? Leo said. Same word, different sentence, Dante said. That's how the underworld talks. The underworld? Leo asked. Dante nodded toward the benches, the phones, the door, the eyes. The system underneath the system. The part you don't see is the part that decides if you get to keep breathing easy. They reached the yard just as the fog lifted and the sun laid down hard, flat light. Lines formed like they always did, some for phones, some for pull-up bars, one for the benches where older men sat like stones in a river. The matchbox paper hopped from shadow to shadow, from cuff to shoe, from shoe to table leg. No one bent. No one stared. It moved as if the ground itself nudged it along. If it stops at your foot? Dante murmured. Don't touch unless the room touches you back. How does a room do that? Leo said. You'll feel it, Dante said. Then the wind shifted and everyone moved in the same instant but Leo. The order slid across the yard without sound. Stand, sit, face the wall. Leo's body lagged by a breath. The paper stopped at his shoe. He froze. Somewhere a cough like a comma. The door boomed. Red lights blinked. Guards stepped. And in that thin slice of time, quiet as fog, Dante angled his foot just enough that the paper kissed his soul and kept traveling. Count. Names. Numbers. Step back. Step back. Step back. After count, the yard let out its breath. The paper reached the far table. An old hand rested on it without looking. The rhythm restarted. See? Dante said softly, eyes forward. No one erased you. The room gave you a second chance. Who decides that? Leo asked. The Underworld, Dante said. And it does not vote out loud. They paced the track. The fence hummed with faint power. Rivera drifted at the edge like a buoy, there, steady, a warning in case the tide turned rough. He didn't control the Underworld. He respected it like you respect a riptide, by not pretending it isn't there. All afternoon the quiet rules ruled. Don't cut the phone line. Don't stand where a bench can't see you. Don't look like you're looking. Do what the room does. Do not be the room. Leo felt the shape of it like a knot you learn by touch before you learn its name. The highs were small and bright. Hearing his name from Nurse Tanya, a good spot in line, 2 jokes traded with nothing but eyebrows. The lows were smaller and heavier. A glance that could mean move, a tap that could mean freeze, a silence that could mean someone is deciding your tomorrow. Near evening, shadows cut the yard into neat pieces. A new tap traveled through the steel, slower, heavier. Dante's shoulders dropped a fraction. Permission, he said under his breath. Permission for what? Leo asked. For what happens next, Dante said. Leo's stomach cooled. What is next? The room will point at someone, Dante said. And that someone will go. Go where? Dante did not answer. He didn't have to. Everyone in Pelican Bay knew what disappear meant here. It could mean a quiet transfer to the SHU, where the world is a box and voices are echoes. Could mean a bus ride to a different yard with a different map. It did not have to mean hurt to be terrifying. The Underworld did not need noise to be strong. It lived on agreement. Obey and you stay in the story. Break it and the story goes on without your name. The loudspeaker coughed. The red lights blinked again, slow like breathing. An officer at the gate spoke into his radio, eyes cutting across the yard. Escort team to C yard. The men on the benches didn't blink. The phone lines didn't sway. The room made its choice. A gloved hand lifted. Fingers pointed. The Underworld spoke with that one small movement. Dante. Cuff up. Leo's chest caved in like a wave hit it. No, he started then stopped because the room told him to stop. Dante didn't flinch. He slid his hands behind him like he had practiced for a play he hoped never to perform. The officer's cuffs clicked. Metal, final, not loud. Rivera stepped closer, jaw tight. He kept his tone even. Let us do our job. Dante looked at Leo once. Not long. Enough. A tiny nod that said breathe, learn, do not follow. Then his eyes went flat again the way eyes go when the Underworld is watching. 2 officers took Dante by the arms. They did not shove. They did not show off. They did not have to. Power here was not a push. It was a path. The line to the door opened by itself. Men stepped back the width of a boot. The matchbox paper ghosted out of sight. The fence hummed. The sky went the color of steel. Nurse Tanya, crossing the yard with her cart, stopped without seeming to stop. She looked at Dante then at Leo then kept walking. Later she would check 2 cups of medicine and ask about headache twice. Rivera watched the escort start down the tunnel. He said, too soft for radios, too loud for secrets. Why him? No one answered. Even questions have rules here. The tunnel swallowed Dante whole. The door at the far end thudded once, thick as a drum. The yard resumed its quiet work. Phones buzzed. A pull-up bar creaked. A gull cried at the wire and left. Leo stood in his spot and tried to be smaller than his fear. He waited for someone to tell him what to do with his hands, his eyes, his heart. He waited for the matchbox paper to return and say something he could bear. Instead, a new sound came, 3 soft taps, a pause, then a fourth, the kind of pattern you only hear when the map has changed. The men by the benches lifted their cups, set them down, lifted them again. The phone stopped mid-ring. Even the wind seemed to hold still. Rivera's radio hissed. A voice said, control to yard, hold position. New directive incoming. Leo looked at the tunnel where Dante had gone. A shadow shifted under the red light. Somewhere deep in the prison, a door unlocked that most men never see. The Underworld had made one move. It was about to make another. The tunnel lights flickered like they were breathing. Dante walked between 2 officers, wrists chained, eyes calm, boots steady on the concrete. He wasn't fighting but he wasn't surrendering either, just moving through a system he'd known too long to fear. Behind him, the sound of the heavy door closing was like a heartbeat stopping. Leo stood frozen in the yard. Around him, everything returned to normal too quickly, too smoothly. It was as if Dante had never been there. The same men lifted their cups, the same guard leaned on the fence, the same seagull circled above the razor wire. But the silence was different now. It had weight. He didn't realize Officer Rivera was watching him. Rivera's hand rested on his radio, but his eyes were softer than usual. He'd seen this before, when the system inside Pelican Bay swallowed one of its own. The underworld didn't need knives or fights to remove someone. All it took was silence, timing, and fear. Later that night, Leo lay on his bunk staring at the gray ceiling. Every hum, every footstep in the hallway, every echo from the vent sounded like a code. He thought of Dante's words, "Silence is loud here." Now it was deafening. Through the vent came 3 soft taps, a pause, then one more, the same rhythm he'd heard after Dante was taken. He whispered, "What does that mean?" to no one. Across the tier, another inmate answered with 2 slow taps. Then another cell joined in. The sound moved like a chain across the block. It wasn't random. It was conversation. The underworld was still talking, and Dante was still part of it somehow. The next morning the guards ran their usual checks. Nurse Tanya pushed her cart along the row, nodding at each cell. When she reached Leo's door, she slid his medication through the slot. "Rough night?" she asked. He nodded, surprised she noticed. "You're not the first," she said quietly. "Men disappear here. Sometimes they come back different. Sometimes they don't come back at all." "Where do they go?" Leo asked. Tanya hesitated. "Segregation. Visit. Officially it's for safety. Unofficially," she shook her head. "Let's just say the walls have more authority than the warden." As she moved on, Leo stared at the note taped to her cart. "Ask about headaches." He wondered how many times she'd written that after someone vanished. By afternoon, word spread through the yard, not through speech but through motion. A new rhythm took over. One man pacing slower, another tying his shoe twice, a third sitting alone with his tray untouched. Even Rivera felt it. He stopped by the surveillance room. "What's the movement today?" he asked. The control officer shrugged. "Same as always. Just quiet." "Too quiet," Rivera said. He leaned over the monitors, scanning each yard feed. Then he saw it, the smallest thing. A man at the far bench was scratching lines into the table with a paper clip. Short, long, short, short, long, long. To most it was nothing. But to Rivera, who had worked here 15 years, it was Morse, a system the inmates had perfected long before the prison banned handwritten notes. "What's that say?" asked the other officer. Rivera squinted. "It says, shift tonight." "Shift what?" "That's what I'm gonna find out," Rivera said, leaving the room. That night, Leo's cell door buzzed open. "Shower rotation," the guard barked. Leo followed the line of men down the hall. The air was damp, the lights buzzing weakly. He stepped into his booth, the cold water shocking him awake. Then, from across the narrow hall, he saw movement, someone pressing a finger to the glass. It was Dante. His head was shaved now, his face thinner, his eyes darker, but it was him. He didn't speak. He tapped 3 times against the glass, slow, deliberate. Then he mouthed one word, "Wait." Before Leo could respond, guards shouted, "Let's move," and the line shifted again. The doors slammed. Dante was gone. Leo's heart pounded. He knew what he saw. Dante was supposed to be in isolation, unreachable. But somehow he was back in the system, still pulling the strings. When he returned to his cell, he lay awake, waiting for another code. Hours passed before he heard it, the same 3 taps, then silence. It meant something big was coming. Morning count. A paper slip slid under Leo's door. No one had walked by, no one had spoken. He picked it up. On it, scrawled in pencil, was a simple phrase. "Obedience earns survival." The underworld had spoken. He didn't know if it was a threat or a warning, but in Pelican Bay both meant the same thing. As the guards called numbers, Leo looked through the narrow glass slit of his door. Across the tier, another inmate lifted his chin in a slow nod. It wasn't friendly, it was acknowledgement. The kind Dante used to give. Leo finally understood. The underworld never lost its leaders, it replaced them. And now, whether he wanted it or not, the system had chosen its next one. The hum of the vents grew louder. A final tap echoed through the block, for sharp knocks that made every man freeze in place. It wasn't Morse code this time. It was a signal. And whatever it meant, Leo knew the next chapter of Pelican Bay's underworld was about to begin.